The wind howled like a wounded beast that night, tearing through the crumbling walls of the outer village as black storm clouds churned over the kingdom of Elerith. Thunder cracked the sky open in jagged streaks of light, and rain lashed the earth as if heaven itself had grown furious. Then, in the heart of the storm, the ancient iron gates of the palace creaked open with a groan that echoed like a warning through the night. She stepped inside, slow, deliberate, and cloaked in shadows. Her hood dripped with rain, but underneath it, her eyes glowed faintly like embers refusing to die. The torches along the palace walls flickered and hissed, bowing to her presence as if they too remembered her. The moment her foot touched the stone path, something shifted. Flowers along the courtyard withered in her wake. Statues cracked. The wind stilled. Even the storm seemed to pause, watching. A guard on the upper wall caught a glimpse of her and staggered back in fear. "It can't be," he muttered, eyes wide, breath caught in his throat. He turned to the others, voice shaking like a dying candle flame. "She's back. The girl the king cast out to die." The guard stood frozen. No one sounded the alarm. No one dared move, for she was not just a woman returning. She was a reckoning wrapped in silence, her presence pulling at the threads of fate itself. The cursed girl, the exiled daughter, the one they left to perish in the haunted forest, had returned, but not as a victim, not as a beggar, not as the frightened child they once banished. And now, the kingdom held its breath, as if asking itself one question: why has she returned? And what storm does she bring with her? Before she was the shadow cloaked in thunder, she was just a child, fragile, wide-eyed, and born beneath a cursed sky. The night Leora entered the world, the blood moon hung low and swollen, bleeding crimson light across the kingdom. The midwives gasped at the markings that trailed down her back like inked vines, ancient symbols no one dared speak aloud. Whispers stirred through the palace halls before her first breath had even steadied. The child is cursed. The child is an omen. The priests arrived before dawn, their robes heavy with incense and dread. They declared her birth a dark prophecy fulfilled. "This one," they said, "will bring ruin. She is born of shadow and sorcery. Keep her close, or she will undo the throne itself." But in the quiet corners of the palace, Leora was something else entirely. A girl who laughed with the garden bird, a girl who whispered to trees and felt them breathe back. Rain calmed under her touch. Sick animals stirred in her arms and opened their eyes as if kissed by light. Her power was not destruction. It was harmony. But harmony can be just as frightening to those built on control. Her mother, Queen Elenara, loved her fiercely and taught her to listen to the wind and the silence between words. But the king, her own father, never looked her in the eye without flinching. To him, she was a threat wrapped in a child's skin. And the priest only fed his fear, reminding him that no ruler who bore a cursed heir ever died peacefully. For 16 years, Leora lived on the edges of her own palace, loved quietly, but feared openly. The servants crossed themselves in her presence. Children were kept from her shadow. And then, on the eve of her 16th birthday, under a crescent moon, her father came to her chambers with cold steel in his eyes. She was torn from her mother's arms in the dead of night, dragged past marble halls and down stone paths toward the edge of the kingdom. With no trial, no farewell, and no voice raised in protest, she was cast into the Whispering Hollow, the forest no one entered and lived to speak of. Her only crime? Being born too different, too powerful, too feared. And as the gates closed behind her, Leora's only wish burned inside her chest like a final heartbeat: to be accepted, to be loved, to prove she was not what they feared, but something far more powerful. The Whispering Hollow greeted her like a mouth ready to swallow. Its trees stretched too tall, their limbs bending unnaturally as if leaning in to hear her cry. The air shimmered with something unspoken, a tension that lived in the roots and shadows. The forest was not silent. It murmured in low, broken voices, rustling secrets through the leaves, whispering her name before she had even spoken it aloud. Leora wandered aimlessly at first, stumbling through thick underbrush and thorns that tore at her robes like claws. The nights were the worst, cold, endless, alive with eyes she could never quite see. Creatures lurked in the dark, feeding off fear, their growls and hisses weaving into the soundscape of her sleep-starved night. They came for her, again and again. They smelled her despair, hunted it, but she did not die. She bled, she wept, she screamed into the trees until her voice broke, but she did not die. She learned. She learned how to move like a shadow and listen like stone. She learned to speak the language of the forest, not with words, but with feeling. When the storms howled above, she whispered to the wind, and it bent. When the beasts approached, teeth bared and eyes gleaming, she did not run. She stood, and the ground itself pulled their hunger down into the soil. In time, she found a grove hidden deep in the heart of the hollow, a place untouched by decay. There, carved into ancient stone and overgrown with ivy, were symbols that matched the markings on her skin. They pulsed when she touched them. The wind stilled. Time held its breath. Visions came, of queens with eyes like hers, and voices that sang the earth into bloom. Women of power. Women who ruled before the priest erased them. Before the kingdom rewrote history to serve only the fearful. She was not cursed. She was chosen, a vessel of ancient magic, a living memory of a lineage the kingdom had buried in shame. And in that revelation, a flicker of purpose was born. But even as her powers grew, wild, elegant, immense, her heart ached. Some nights she would curl under moss-covered trees and weep softly into her hands. She would dream of her mother's lullabies, half-forgotten melodies that once made her feel safe. She would see the face of her younger brother, Elion, the boy who never looked at her when others were around, but who once slipped a ribbon under her door on her 12th birthday when he thought no one would see. She yearned for warmth, for belonging, for proof that someone, somewhere, still remembered the girl they had cast out. The forest had given her power, yes, but it had also carved a loneliness deep into her bones. And though she walked with spirits and command over sky and stone, her soul still whispered the same aching question night after night. Will I ever be more than what they feared? Will I ever be loved for who I truly am? It was the scent of blood that drew her to him. Leora had grown used to the forest's rhythms, its strange symphony of whispers and wails, its sudden silences. But that day, the wind carried something foreign, human, fragile. She followed it through the underbrush, heart steady, steps silent. And there, beneath a fallen cedar, she found him, a boy, no older than her brother had been when she last saw him, crumpled and pale, his leg twisted unnaturally beneath him. His cloak bore the sigil of the royal court. For a moment, her heart froze. Was he sent to hunt her? But the fear in his eyes was not the kind born of hatred. It was the kind born of pain and desperation. She could have walked away. Instead, she reached out. Her hands moved with instinct, channeling the warmth of the forest, calling the life beneath the roots. The ground responded. Slowly, his breathing calmed, his wounds sealed, and color returned to his cheeks. When he woke, he did not scream. He stared, awestruck, ashamed. You're her, aren't you? He whispered, voice trembling. The girl from the stories, the cursed one. Leora didn't answer. He sat up, wincing. They sent me to map the hollow, but everything's wrong. The maps burn in our hands. The stars vanish at night. We've lost 3 men already. The kingdom, it's falling apart. His voice lowered, fear thickening every word. Crops are rotting in the fields. Whole villages swallowed by storms. People vanishing in daylight. He looked into her eyes, then truly looked, and added, There's a prophecy, old, forbidden. It says, When the cursed child returns, the truth shall rise, and balance will be restored. The word struck her like lightning. Could it be? Had all of this, her pain, her exile, her power, been leading here? But as the idea sparked, so did the old fear. Would they greet her as a savior, or strike her down the moment she stepped beyond the forest edge? That night, as she sat beside her sacred grove, the spirits gathered, whispers coiling like smoke. If you go back, they warned, they will try to break you again. But you are no longer the child they cast out. She looked into the moonlight, silent and torn. Hope had returned, but so had the storm. The moon was full, hanging low over the hollow like a watching eye. Its silver light spilled through the trees and bathed Leora in a glow that felt different, heavier, charged. That night, she stood in her sacred grove, hand resting against the runes carved by queens long forgotten. When the vision came, it didn't come like dreams or whispers. It struck her, raw and vivid, like lightning. She saw chains, cold, iron, cruel, a cell deep beneath the palace stone. And in that darkness, a woman, aged, gaunt, but still regal, her face worn by time but unmistakable, her mother, the queen. Tears burned down Leora's cheeks as the vision unfolded. Her mother screaming in the throne room the day of the banishment, begging the king to stop, to see truth instead of fear. She had defied him, and she had paid dearly. The world said the queen had gone into seclusion, but no, she had been silenced, caged, for loving her daughter too loudly. Leora fell to her knees, the grief of it folding her in half. It had never been about the curse. It had always been about power, control, fear. When she rose again, something inside her had changed. Her desire to be accepted, it was gone, burned away like fog in the morning sun. What remained was something harder, sharper. She would no longer ask to be seen. She would make them look. And so she waited for the eclipse, the day power was set to shift in the kingdom's ancient lore. When the sun bowed before the moon and the sky turned to shadow. A rare event, a sacred one. She walked into the kingdom as darkness fell across the land. Hooded, silent, unseen at first, until the people gathered in the square for the eclipse. As the light dimmed and the air stilled, she stepped forward. One by one, heads turned. Gasps escaped trembling lips. Eyes widened. The cursed girl, someone whispered. She lives. No, that's not a girl anymore. She threw back her hood, hair like flame, eyes like storm, and behind her, the wind howled, not in fear, but in reverence. Birds circled high, and the earth beneath her feet shimmered with unseen runes. The forest had followed her. The king appeared on the palace balcony, face pale, heart thunderous. He recognized her at once. Rage twisted his mouth. "Seize her!" he bellowed. "Execute her! Now!" Guards rushed toward her with chains of blackened steel, forged with spells to bind magic. But as they reached for her wrists, the sky cracked open, not with thunder, but with memory. The chains never touched her. From within her blood, something ancient stirred, power long buried, long silenced, awakened with a roar. The earth pulsed. The guards were flung backward by an unseen force. Runes ignited across her skin, glowing gold like fire kissed by divinity. Leora didn't flinch. She didn't run. She rose. And as the eclipse reached its peak and the kingdom stood frozen in shadow, one terrifying truth echoed in every soul present. She had returned, not to beg, but to bring reckoning. The light didn't fade after the eclipse. It shattered. Leora stood at the center of the kingdom square, her veins still glowing with ancient fire, but her body trembling beneath the weight of what had awakened. She had not yet learned to control it. And the king, seething and shaken, used that moment of faltering to strike. With a chant drawn from forbidden rites, He cast a binding spell that wrapped around her like burning ropes, stealing the breath from her lungs. She collapsed, not from weakness, but from exhaustion. The people watched in stunned silence as their long-lost exile was dragged away in chains of cursed iron, a flare of golden light still pulsing beneath her skin like a heartbeat unwilling to die. They took her to the depths of the palace, the belly of the beast, past torchlit corridors, behind iron gates slick with rust and sorrow, and there, in a cell carved from stone and silence, they threw her down. She landed hard, pain ripping through her spine. But then, movement. A voice, faint but familiar. "Leora?" Her head snapped up. In the shadows sat a woman cloaked in silver hair and Time's cruel hand. Her face was thinner, her hands worn, but her eyes, oh, her eyes, were still fierce, still burning. "Mother!" Leora's voice cracked. They crossed the cell in heartbeats collapsing into each other. Years of longing spilled between them. Tears, tremors, silence that said more than words ever could. "I searched for you," the queen whispered into her daughter's hair. "Even when they told me you were dead, I knew. I came back," Leora sobbed. I thought I had to show them that I wasn't a monster." The queen held her tighter. "You were never the monster. They feared you because they could not control you." Leora pulled away, her voice trembling with fire. "I could end this kingdom, right now. Burn the throne. Bring the walls down with a breath. They would never hurt us again." And it was true. The power she carried now, the ancient gift of the forgotten queens, was enough to raise the entire realm to ash. The spirits of the hollows stirred within her veins, whispering vengeance, whispering justice. But something inside her twisted. Would that make her different from the king who had cast her out? Was destruction the only way? Above them, the sky darkened unnaturally, the sun shrouded by clouds that bled violet. The air grew heavy. Outside the palace, riots sparked. Fearful citizens turning on each other, confused and enraged by what they didn't understand. Fires crackled. Screams echoed. The kingdom felt her pain, her fury, but in the eye of the storm, in the quiet of that dungeon cell, a mother held her daughter's trembling hands. "Leora," she said, her voice a quiet storm, "you don't have to become what they fear. You can become something greater." And for the first time, Leora didn't know what that meant. She only knew the choice would cost her everything. The dungeon grew silent after the storm above quieted. But Leora knew the silence wasn't peace. It was the breath before transformation. She sat cross-legged on the cold stone floor, eyes closed, her mother watching her in reverent stillness. Beneath her skin, the whispering of the forest returned, not from the trees now, but from something deeper, older, a presence beneath the bones of the earth. She breathed in, and the world shifted. Her spirit was pulled into a glowing field of silver mist and moonlight. Figures emerged, tall, regal, cloaked in woven light and memory. Women with crowns of antlers and braided flame. Women who bore the same marks on their skin as Leora. The spirits of the ancient queens. "You are not cursed," they said as one. Their voices rang like wind chimes and thunder, soft and powerful all at once. "You are the flame they tried to extinguish, the daughter of a line the kingdom tried to erase." Leora watched their memories unfold, visions of matriarchs who once ruled with wisdom, balance, and fierce love, until fear rose in the hearts of men, until the kings poisoned the minds of the people, rewriting the stories, branding the daughters of power as witches and omens of ruin. She saw it all, and she wept, not in sorrow, but in clarity. She was not broken. She was the last heir, not to a throne made of stone and cruelty, but to a legacy rooted in justice, power, and harmony. When her eyes opened again, the air had shifted. The dungeon walls began to glow with a warm, golden hue. The cursed iron that bound her wrists crumbled into dust. The stone beneath her feet pulsed once, then softened into petals of light. She stood no longer a prisoner, but a queen reborn. With a glance toward her mother, who now smiled through tears, Leora placed a hand on the dungeon wall. The stone opened, not shattered, not broken. It opened, willingly, recognizing the return of a true sovereign. Leora emerged into the streets cloaked in golden twilight. No guard dared raise a weapon. No citizen screamed. They only watched, frozen, as the girl they had feared walked past them wrapped in silence and light. They felt it in their bones, the truth. She was not their doom. She was their beginning. And now she walked toward the palace, not as a daughter returning, but as the rightful queen ready to reclaim what had been stolen. The great doors of the throne room groaned open as if in mourning, their iron hinges shrieking in protest. Leora entered alone. The red carpet, once a symbol of royal pride, looked like a vein stretched across a doming heart. At the far end, upon the golden seat of power, sat the man who had once been her father, crowned in stolen legacy and wrapped in fear. King Aldred rose, his face pale, eyes wide, hand trembling on the hilt of his sword. "Do not take another step," he barked, though his voice cracked like old wood. Leora didn't flinch. Her presence pulsed with something older than time. Grace wrapped in fury, calm laced with storm. She stepped closer. The throne room darkened, save for the golden light that trailed in her wake. The king drew his sword with shaking hands. Steel gleamed in the firelight. Then the blade disintegrated, not shattered, not broken. It crumbled like sand in his grip, falling through his fingers in a hush. He staggered back, horror twisting his features. "What are you?" Leora's voice was low, clear, and unwavering. "Not what. Who?" She lifted her hand, and the stained glass above them, depicting kings, warriors, and priests, fractured with a thunderous crack. Light poured through the broken mosaic, casting rainbow shards across the marble floor. "I offer you one choice, Aldred. Confess the truth, or be swallowed by it." The silence that followed was unbearable. Even the guards didn't move. Every eye watched the king. He dropped to his knees. "They told me," he whispered, voice crumbling like his sword. "The priests said your birth would end my reign. They said you'd bring ruin. They lied to me. I was afraid. I was a fool." Tears streaked the face of the once mighty king as he bowed his head to the child he had exiled. Leora turned, not to him, but to the gathering crowd now flooding into the throne room. Word had spread. The people had come. They stared, uncertain, until she raised her hands, and her voice soared like thunderclouds breaking. "You feared what you did not understand. You silenced the women who once kept this land in balance. You let fear rot the roots of this kingdom." She paused, letting her eyes meet theirs. "But I am not your curse. I am your reckoning and your renewal." A hush fell. Then slowly, one by one, knees touched the ground, not before the king, before her. The last heir of the forgotten queens, the daughter of exiled blood, the one they cast out, and now the only one who could lead them into the light. Light burst through the stained glass above, blinding and pure, washing over the throne as if blessing the moment itself. The kingdom was reborn, not through conquest, but through truth, and the era of shadows ended at her feet. The dungeon gate swung open with a sound like a sigh released after years of breathless silence. Leora stood at the threshold, cloaked in morning light, as her mother was led out, frail but unbroken. The queen's eyes welled as she looked upon the daughter they all tried to forget, yet who had returned as something greater than prophecy could ever predict. "I told them you were not a curse," she whispered, voice cracked by time, but still sharp with truth. Leora took her mother's hand, and together they rose from the shadows of stone into the dawning light of a kingdom reborn. The news spread like wildfire, only this time it did not scorch. It warmed. People emerged from their homes, shedding fear like old skin. The cursed child was no longer cursed. She was queen, and with her, hope returned. Leora walked the same fields where once she'd been hunted like an animal. Children ran beside her now, tossing wildflowers into her path. Old men bowed. Young women looked to her with fire in their eyes, no longer afraid to dream of power, no longer willing to shrink. She passed the priests who once condemned her. They said nothing. She did not need revenge. They were ghosts in a new world. At the heart of the city, she opened the doors to a new kind of palace, not one built on blood and silence, but on stories and sunlight. She transformed the old war hall into a school, where forgotten truths were taught, where young minds learned the songs of the forest and the names of the ancient queens. The scrolls that once named her evil were burned in a quiet ceremony. Leora scattered their ashes in the wind, and in their place she planted gardens, each flower blooming a different color of freedom. The forest, once feared, now hummed with peace. It no longer whispered warnings, but sang lullabies on the wind. And one morning, as the sky blushed with the first light of day, Leora stood alone on the palace balcony. The kingdom stretched below her, no longer trembling. She smiled, not because she was accepted, but because she no longer needed to be. She had become her own salvation, and the kingdom was finally worthy of her return. They called her cursed. They cast her out to the shadows, but she returned, not to seek revenge, but to restore what they tried to erase. If you were in her place, would you have the courage to come back, to claim your truth? If this story moved you, share your thoughts below. Let us know how it made you feel. And if you believe in the power within, don't forget to like, subscribe, and share this story with someone who needs to hear it. Your power is not a curse, it's your